President Trump taking on a new target in some early morning tweets from South Florida, where he is spending the Thanksgiving holiday with his family. Good morning to you. I'm John Scott.
And I'm Julie Banderas. And good morning to you. And the war of words heating up. The president lashing out at the father of one of the UCLA basketball players detained for shoplifting in China, calling him, quote, an ungrateful fool for not thanking the president after his son's release. The president also taking aim at the NFL, bashing a plan to keep teams in the locker rooms during the national anthem.
White House correspondent Kevin Cork live in D.C. for us now. Kevin.
Hey guys, the president is obviously on the links this morning, but he certainly says he's going to be very busy during his holiday vacation down at the Winter White House at Mar-a-Lago. In addition to making calls and holding meetings, he'll obviously be giving us an update on the missing sailors that is out in the Pacific. But clearly sports are on the president's mind this morning. As you point out, he's upping the ante in his Twitter battle with LeVar Ball. Let me show you part of what the president had to say in a series of tweets this morning, talking about the UCLA dad whose son was, of course, caught stealing over in China. The president tweeting this: it wasn't the White House, it wasn't the State Department, it wasn't Father LeVar's so-called people on the ground in China that got his son out of a long-term prison sentence. It was me, all caps. He goes on to say, too bad. LeVar is just a poor man's version of Don King, but without the hair. Just think, he continues, just think LeVar, that is. You could have spent the next 5 to 10 years during Thanksgiving with your son in China, but no NBA contract to support you. But remember, LeVar, shoplifting is not a little thing. It's a really big deal, especially in China. Ungrateful fool. Wow. Mr. Ball, not the only target of the president's Twitter ire. He's also ranting today about the NFL and Roger Goodell, that's the NFL commissioner, and his role for not getting his players to stop kneeling and protesting during the national anthem. Let me take you back to Twitter so I can show you what the president had to say about that. This also raising a few eyebrows this morning. The NFL is now thinking about a new idea, keeping teams in the locker room during the national anthem next season. That's almost as bad as kneeling. When will the highly paid commissioner finally get tough and smart? This issue is killing your league. Now, on the political front, the president did finally weigh in yesterday on the Roy Moore controversy. And while it's true he did pass on a chance to publicly endorse Moore, he didn't really criticize him either. Instead, he said the voters of Alabama will choose their next senator. And he was also asked, by the way, if he might campaign for the Republican in the race. The president said this.
Need a liberal person in there, a Democrat. Jones, I've looked at his record. It's terrible on crime. It's terrible on the border. It's terrible.
He called Jones soft on crime there, and when he was asked if he might go ahead and, get down there in the Yellowhammer State and do a little campaigning for Roy Moore, the president bypassed a chance to weigh in definitively. He did say he would let us know next week. By the way, the election is coming up on December 12th, which means we'll have plenty of time to talk about it. Guys, back to you.
All right. Thanks very much. Kevin Cork joining us from Washington, D.C. Kevin.
And as Kevin Cork just reported, the president finally broke his silence on Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore, seeming to take Moore at his word. Take a listen.
Well, he denies it. Look, he denies it. I mean, if you look at what is really going on, and you look at all the things that have happened over the last 48 hours, he totally denies it. He says it didn't happen. And, you have to listen to him also. You're talking about, he said 40 years ago this did not happen.
Joining us now, Robin Byro, Obama campaign regional field director and a Democratic strategist, Ari Fleischer, former White House press secretary for President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Robin, let me start with you. Are you surprised by the fact that President Trump is throwing his support by Roy Moore?
Julie, I am not at the least surprised because Donald Trump has always been anti-GOP, and the GOP came out against Roy Moore. So, frankly, I sort of was expecting this. I just was disappointed by it. I honestly do try to give this president every benefit of a doubt. I thought he would take the high road here and maybe just recuse himself from this. But no, it's still us versus them. It's still, what he's giving us, the argument that he's giving us is that, hey, at least he's not a Democrat. He says he didn't do these things. Hey, he's told us the same things about Vladimir Putin. So he clearly believes Vladimir Putin and he believes Roy Moore just on their word alone. So I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed, Julie.
He is supporting the Republican in the race. It's not as if he hasn't in the past said that if Roy Moore is guilty of what he's being accused of, that he should step aside. But as we all know, Roy Moore wasn't actually the president's first choice. I mean, he did campaign for Luther Strange in the special election. And in fact, it was Steve Bannon that campaigned for Moore. Why wasn't Moore President Trump's initial pick?
That he honestly was going along with what Mitch McConnell said, and I was surprised by that, but he gave it a shot. I think that he didn't want to. When he gave that support, it seemed pretty tepid. He even said during that campaign rally, I'm not even sure that I'm making the best decision here. That's about the least exciting endorsement I think I've ever heard in all of my years in politics. But all of this has come out. It's post-fact about Roy Moore and these allegations, and they do go back 40 years, but that doesn't excuse the behavior. And Doug Jones doesn't have a record like that. He's a very conservative Democrat, contrary to what Donald Trump has been saying, touting him as a liberal.
Okay, so
I'm not sure where we stand on this.
No matter what the reason why, I mean, the bottom line is that this election in Alabama, a lot is riding on it, and the GOP needs this win. However, the disappointing factor is that you have Al Franken, who's a Democrat, who's been accused of much less, and you have the president tweeting about Al Franken and calling him Frankenstein. And yet something that happened 40 years ago, nonetheless, it was 40 years ago, there are still accusations, not from one accuser or two under Al Franken's situation. There's over 9. I want to play some quick sound here about the president and why he is backing Roy Moore. We're going to try to effort R.A. Fleischer, actually, because we're having some technical difficulties with that. But here's what President Trump said. I can tell you one thing for sure. We don't need a liberal person in there, a Democrat candidate for Senate in Alabama, Doug Jones. I looked at his record. We played this sound earlier where he talks about it's terrible. He's terrible on crime, border, military. So he points out, obviously, Doug Jones is not the perfect candidate. But is it coming down to an alleged pedophile versus a Democrat? Is that the choice that the American people of Alabama are being forced to choose between?
Yes, that is absolutely the choice, and it's ridiculous. My fear, Julie, is that the GOP has touted for decades that they are the family values party. I'm afraid that they're at risk of losing that. And right now, Democrats, look, when Anthony Weiner had the first pictures that came out, we denounced him and distanced ourselves from him. We have been coming out in droves saying that Al Franken needs to resign. I've been on 3 times this week saying that he needs to resign. And then you see the GOP now propping up Roy Moore, saying, I've even seen pastors now using ancient biblical scripture to try and justify what he's saying. It's inexcusable. There is no excuse for this if it did happen.
I mean, it's
and his, excuse me, just one point I want to make. His publicist even went so far as to say that Democrats and the liberals don't understand Alabama dating. That's absurd to me, and I'm really worried that the Republicans might be at risk of losing their family values platform.
There was a priest that came out and recently said that when he had gone off to serve in the military, when he came back, everyone he knew back in his younger years had gone off and been married, and so there really was nobody left, and that's why he tended to date younger girls, because there was a purity about them. And there is a belief in that back in the day, 40 years ago, that men did like to court younger girls. In fact, till this day, how many men do you know that are dating somebody 30 years younger than them? How many women, as they are called cougars insultingly, date younger men? I mean, there's a double standard here, but it is true that men do tend to go for younger women. I hate to be the one to say that, being a woman myself. Is there a double standard here? Are we reading too much into this?
I do see your point about there being a double standard, but the fact that he got the parents' permission to date a teenager, I just can't get on board with that. And I don't understand why Republicans are excusing it, even though it did happen 40 years ago and things may be different in Alabama, that still, like Doug Jones has a pure record. And he's, like I said, he's a conservative Democrat. I denounce that it's not simply not true about being a liberal Democrat.
Ari Fleischer now is joining me, and I'm sorry, Ari, we've been having such technical difficulties, but I just really do want to get you to weigh in on this. Where do you stand when it comes to the president supporting Roy Moore?
Well, I think the president is in an impossible catch-22, and that's if the president said that Roy Moore should drop out of the race, it immediately raises the issues, why didn't President Trump drop out of the race? If he stands by Roy Moore, he gets accused of all the things he's getting accused of now, looking the other way. Look, this whole thing is a mess. It's a mess for the Democrats who have to defend Al Franken and now John Conyers. It's a mess for Republicans who may elect somebody like Roy Moore to the seat. The right moral thing to do, in my judgment, is for Roy Moore to have dropped out of the race. I just wish he had done that. I think it would be the right ethical thing. Well, then you have to let the people of Alabama sort it out and figure it out. The only alternative I can think of is that Roy Moore gets elected and then he gets thrown out of the Senate and the Republican governor then appoints somebody. But look, that's why this whole thing is a mess. It's been a mess from the start, and we're stuck with a mess.
I mean, unfortunately, in corporations, when somebody is called out, such as Charlie Rose or Harvey Weinstein, they get fired. These politicians don't have to live under the same rules. Ari, that's a problem. Does that ever seem to be something that might be changed in the future? You're saying the governor could appoint a new senator if that were the case down the road, but that just doesn't seem right.
Well, and that also means Roy Moore gets elected. And I do think there is some merit in saying let the people of Alabama decide this. They are the jury in this instance, and I think that is somewhat appropriate. It still doesn't make me any more of a supporter or less of a supporter. I don't care for Roy Moore because I believe the women in this case. I thought that story was well reported. But here's another problem. The Democrats have it with John Conyers. A member of the Democratic House leadership said yesterday, reported in today's New York Times, about Conyers, that the charges, the claims may may not have any real substance. You can't jump to conclusions with these types of things, he said. For all I know, all this could be made up. And that's what James Clyburn, a Democratic member of the House leadership, said about his colleague, John Conyers. So he and President Trump are both saying the same thing about the people in their parties that they support.
All right.
The Democrats and the Republicans are just as guilty in this instance.
It doesn't matter which party you are in. It is inexcusable. Robin Biro, Ari Fleischer, thank you both.